Have you ever been looked at like a smudge on a glass someone keeps trying to wipe away, but can't? That's how Victoria looked at me the very first time we met. We were at some art gala in the city. Josh had just introduced me as his girlfriend, and she didn't even blink. She just said, "Oh," tilted her head slightly, and took a slow sip of her champagne. It was so subtle, so perfectly calculated, that Josh didn't even notice. But I did. I felt it. That look, like I didn't belong, like I was some temporary accessory he'd forget at coat check. I've never been the type to let rich people intimidate me. I grew up wiping tables and pouring coffee for truckers and night shift nurses in my parents' diner. I know how to work. I know how to hustle. I paid off my own student loans and bought my first car in cash. But none of that mattered to Victoria. To her, hard work was cute, a fun little story for cocktail parties. What really mattered was breeding, pedigree, family names etched into bronze plaques at golf clubs. And I had none of that. Still, I love Josh, and for all his family's pomp, he was different, kind, grounded. He never once made me feel small, not even when we moved into that insane townhouse his parents gave us a starter gift for. He respected my independence, encouraged my business ideas, and even helped me flip my first property. So I did my best to ignore Victoria's icy smiles and little digs. I told myself she'd warm up eventually. She didn't. Her insults were always disguised as compliments. "You're so brave to wear something so simple in a crowd like this. It's admirable how you've made something of yourself, considering your background." One time she even told me she admired how I managed expectations. I didn't even know what that meant. Josh told me to brush it off. That's just how she is, but how she is slowly chipped away at me. The cousin's wedding was just another event on the endless list of lavish family affairs. But this one was different. The bride Lily was sweet, not cut from the same cloth as Victoria. She'd always been kind to me. I liked her. So when Josh told me that her side of the family was struggling to pay for some of the last-minute additions, extra guests, upgraded lighting, live musicians, I didn't think twice. We had just closed a major real estate deal. It was a rundown craftsman I'd spotted, convinced Josh to invest in, and the profit was massive. I felt proud, capable. For once, I had real leverage in this world of legacy wealth. So I quietly called the wedding planner and offered to cover a portion of the cost. I didn't want a big deal made of it. I just liked the idea of helping without needing credit. I even told the planner, "Keep it anonymous, please." And she agreed. Or so I thought. Then came the rehearsal dinner. It was one of those long table affairs under fairy lights, soft jazz playing, wine flowing like water. Victoria was in her element, air kissing relatives, complimenting pearls and Botox results. When she made it to our table, she scanned me from head to toe like I was something she might return at Nordstrom. I wore a classic black dress. Nothing flashy, just elegant. She smiled, tight as ever, and said, "Well, you certainly know how to keep things modest. Good for you, darling. A girl like you should learn to stay within her means." The table went dead quiet. Then came a forced laughter. Awkward, brittle. I just nodded, took a sip of my water, and swallowed every word I wanted to say. Josh gave my hand a squeeze under the table. I knew he was embarrassed, but not as much as I was. I told myself again, this would pass. A few more hours, and we'd get through the wedding, and I could go back to my own world. The world where hard work mattered more than bloodlines. The next day, the vineyard was transformed into something out of a movie. Draped silks, live string quartet, golden cutlery, crystal glasses. It was almost absurd. Guests arrived in town cars and designer dresses, smiling and air kissing like they'd stepped off a magazine page. I tried to stay in the background, just enjoy the event. I wasn't there to make waves. But then I saw it. Right at the entrance, framed by two huge floral arches, stood a massive cream and gold welcome board, the kind you couldn't miss. At first glance, it looked like your standard seating chart. But underneath the usual categories, bride's family, groom's friends, honored guests, there it was, Event made possible by our lead investor, Mrs. My full name. And just like that, everything stopped. Every conversation around me faded into a strange buzz. I watched as guests paused, read the sign, and glanced around curious. I didn't know what to do. I hadn't asked for this. I didn't even want this. But before I could react, I saw her, Victoria. She was walking up with a group of relatives, her arms linked with her husband's, her signature pearl necklace glowing in the sun. She stopped right in front of the board. Her eyes scanned the names and then locked on mine. And I swear, for the first time in my life, she blinked. Then her smile froze, completely, like a statue mid-laugh, and that's when it all started to unravel. Victoria didn't speak a word. She just stood there, staring at the sign as if the entire world had shifted beneath her feet. Her eyes flicked from the gold letters of my name back to Josh, and then, almost imperceptibly, she glanced back at me. It was the kind of look that could kill. I could practically feel the weight of her thoughts pressing down on me, but I didn't dare break the silence. Josh, bless him, had no idea what was going on. He was busy greeting the bride's family, smiling and laughing, unaware that the entire social order was about to collapse. It wasn't until a few minutes later, when I saw Victoria talking quietly with one of the wedding planners, that I began to realize just how deep this was going. Her voice was low but sharp, a harsh whisper cutting through the noise of the bustling guests. I couldn't hear the words, but I could feel the venom in her posture, the way she pointed to the board, and the almost imperceptible shake of her head. It was in that moment I knew this wasn't about the money. It wasn't about the wedding. It was about power. And for the first time in my life, I was holding a piece of it. As the day went on, I could feel the tension in the air. Victoria moved through the crowd, talking to her usual inner circle, but her eyes kept darting over to me. She never once approached me directly, but I felt her gaze on my back, her whispered conversations with her family becoming more pointed. They were all trying to figure it out, trying to reconcile what they thought they knew with the fact that me, was the one who would save this event. I didn't care. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like an outsider. As I mingled with the guests, I could see them looking at me differently. I was no longer just Josh's girlfriend, the poor girl who had somehow ended up in this world of wealth and legacy. I was the one who had made the party possible. I was the reason the champagne kept flowing, the reason the band was playing, the reason the lights twinkled in the trees. My money, my investment had made all of this happen, and everyone knew it. At the reception, things only got more surreal. I could see people whispering, then coming up to me with questions about the real estate market, about investments. They treated me like a businesswoman, not just a guest. I didn't mind it. In fact, I was starting to enjoy it. I was living this moment and it felt intoxicating. Victoria, on the other hand, couldn't look me in the eye. Every time I passed her table, I could feel her bristling. She would stare at her plate, her jaw set in that same rigid line. Her perfect world, the one she had built with decades of privilege, was beginning to crumble. And I couldn't help but feel a small surge of satisfaction. At one point, I caught sight of her talking to Josh's father. They were standing off to the side, deep in conversation, and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the tension in their body language. I knew she was telling him what had happened. She was probably spinning some tale about how rude I was, how out of place I'd been. But it didn't matter. Josh's dad, who had always been polite but distant, was giving her nothing. His eyes were on me, and for the first time, I saw approval, not just tolerance, but real respect. It felt like a tiny victory. When the night was winding down, I finally had a chance to speak with Josh alone. He was beaming, of course, still riding high from the successful event. But there was something in his eyes that told me he was noticing the shift. He looked at me, then back at the guests, then back at me again, as if he was seeing me in a new light. "You really did this, didn't you?" he asked quietly, a little awe in his voice. I smiled, though it felt strange. "Yeah, I guess I did." He leaned in close and whispered, "You know, my mom's been giving me the cold shoulder all day. What happened?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I took a deep breath and glanced around the room. The chandeliers were sparkling above us. The laughter of guests filled the air, and the warmth of the firelight softened the edges of everything. It was a perfect night, a night that I'd made possible. "She'll get over it," I said finally, my voice low. Josh didn't press further. He didn't need to. He was still processing everything, but I could tell he was proud of me, of us. The night was a success, but I could see the faint traces of doubt creeping in. The roles had changed. In the grand theater of his family, I was no longer the unimportant, underappreciated wife. I was the one who held the power, and everyone around me knew it. As we left the venue that night, Josh's arm around my shoulder, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. The evening had been perfect in every way, and yet I couldn't ignore the undercurrent of tension that had simmered beneath it all. Victoria wasn't done with me yet. This was only the beginning. Little did I know, that night was just the start of an entirely new game. The next few days passed in a blur of congratulatory messages, text threads with the bride's family, and Josh's subtle praise for my business acumen. But beneath the surface of all the positive feedback, something was off. It was like a low hum in the back of my mind. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I could feel it. Victoria was silent. After the wedding, there were no passive-aggressive comments, no backhanded jabs about how modest I had been. It was like she had retreated into herself, nursing her pride. For days, she didn't pick up the phone when I called. She didn't respond to my text messages. I wasn't surprised. After all, it wasn't the first time she'd iced me out, but this time it felt different. The tension was heavier. It was as if I had unwittingly crossed an invisible line, and she was preparing for battle. Josh, in the meantime, was oblivious. He thought it was just another of his mother's moods. He kept telling me to ignore her, that she'd get over it. But I could tell he was starting to notice things. The way his mother avoided eye contact with me during family dinners. The way she'd make excuses not to be in the same room. It was also obvious. A week after the wedding, I received a call from one of Josh's cousins, Emma. We had become friends over the years, but I had a sinking feeling in my stomach when I saw her name flash across the screen. Something was coming. "Hey, are you free tomorrow?" she asked, her voice careful but urgent. "I think so. Why? Can you meet me for coffee? I need to talk to you about something." I agreed without hesitation. Emma had always been the sweet one in the family, the one who never took sides, the one who stayed out of drama. If she was reaching out to me like this, it wasn't good. When we met, she looked around nervously before sliding into the booth across from me. Her usual bubbly demeanor was replaced with a tight-lipped seriousness. "Is everything okay?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Emma paused, clearly struggling with how to begin. "I'm worried about you, actually." "Me?" I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" She glanced over her shoulder again, then lowered her voice. "I don't know how to say this, but Victoria's been making some calls about you." My stomach dropped. "What calls?" "She's been talking to people in the family, trying to figure out who you really are." I blinked, trying to process her words. "What does that mean?" Emma hesitated. "She wants to know more about your business, about your investment. She's trying to figure out how you got the money to cover the wedding. She's suspicious of you, and she's not letting it go. She's digging, and it's starting to cause a lot of problems." I felt a chill race down my spine. I'd known Victoria wasn't happy with me, but I hadn't expected her to take things this far. To investigate me, to pry into my personal finances. This was no longer about a few passive-aggressive comments. This was personal. "Is Josh aware of this?" I asked, cowed, my voice trembling. No, I don't think so, Emma replied. But if he finds out, it's going to blow up, and it'll be bad for you. The room seemed to spin around me. My mind raced with a million thoughts, each one worse than the last. I had thought Victoria would get over it, that the wedding would be the final nail in the coffin of her petty animosity. But now I could see it. She wasn't just mad, she was furious. I spent the rest of the day in a haze, replaying Emma's words over and over in my mind. Victoria's suspicion wasn't just about money or status. It was about control. She'd always been in control of her world, and I was the intruder. I was the one who had dared to challenge her, to step outside my place. And now, she was coming for me. The next evening after dinner, I found Josh sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. His casual demeanor did nothing to ease the knot in my stomach. I had to tell him. He needed to know what was going on before things got worse. Josh, we need to talk, I said, my voice tight. He looked up from his phone, startled. What's wrong? I exhaled slowly, trying to gather my thoughts. It's about your mom. He frowned. What now? She's been looking into my business. She's been asking questions, trying to figure out how I got the money to cover the wedding. His eyes widened. What? That doesn't make any sense. I know, I said, voice trembling slightly. But Emma told me she's been making calls. She's suspicious of me, of us. For a long moment, there was silence. Josh just stared at me, his eyes wide, as if he couldn't quite process what I was saying. Why would she do that? What does she think? I don't know, Josh, I replied, my voice breaking. But she's pissed at me, and I think she's going to make sure I don't get away with it. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. This is insane. Why would she do this? Why now? I didn't have an answer. All I knew was that this wasn't going to end well. Josh stood up suddenly, pacing in the living room. I'm going to talk to her. I'll put an end to this right now. No, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You can't. If you confront her, it'll make everything worse. He stopped in his tracks and turned to face me, his expression one of confusion. What do you mean? I have to confront her. I shook my head. Josh, you don't understand. She's already dug her heels in. If you go at her head on, it'll be a war, and I'm not sure I'm ready for that. He looked at me, torn. I could see the frustration in his eyes, the way he wanted to defend me, but he didn't know how. The silence hung between us, thick and heavy. I wanted to believe that everything would work out, that Victoria would back down. But deep down, I knew this was far from over. The fight had just begun. And as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, one question kept echoing in my mind. How far was I willing to go to protect what I'd built? And how much of myself was I willing to lose in the process? The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog. Every time I tried to push the thoughts of Victoria's investigation out of my mind, they crept back in. I found myself checking my phone more often, half expecting another call or text from Josh's family. Or worse, Victoria herself. But there was nothing. The silence was deafening. Josh and I had avoided talking much about the situation. I could tell he was frustrated, but he didn't know how to handle it. He kept telling me everything would blow over, that his mom would eventually get bored and move on. But something told me this wasn't just about money. Victoria's obsession with me was deeper than that. It was about control, and it seemed like she wasn't going to stop until she had it all, or until I was out of the picture. It wasn't until the following weekend that things really began to unravel. Josh and I were supposed to spend the Saturday with his family, a casual get-together to celebrate a few birthdays. But I had a sinking feeling in my stomach that something would go wrong. Victoria hadn't been at any of the events recently, always making excuses or coming up with last-minute reasons to bail. But I knew better than to think she wasn't planning something. As we arrived at the house, I could feel my palms start to sweat. Josh seemed oblivious, chatting away about something silly as we walked up to the front door. But the moment we stepped inside, I knew something was off. There was an unnatural stillness in the air. No one greeted us, no one was talking. It was like a heavy cloud had settled over the place, and I immediately felt like the outsider. Josh's cousin, Emma, was the first to approach. She had a nervous look on her face, and I could see she'd been trying to reach me all week. But as soon as I saw her, I knew she wasn't here for casual conversation. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice low. I nodded, stepping away from Josh, who had already disappeared into the living room. Emma led me to the kitchen, where we could speak more privately. "Victoria's here," she said almost in a whisper. I blinked. "What do you mean she's here? I thought she wasn't coming today." "She came, but she's been acting strange. She's been avoiding you, but now, I don't know. It feels like something's going to happen." A wave of panic surged through me. I had hoped she'd lay low for a while, that things would cool off after our last conversation, but Victoria wasn't the type to back down. She'd never let me get the upper hand. "Did she say anything about me?" I asked, my voice trembling. Emma hesitated. "Not directly, but she's been watching you. I think she's trying to figure out how much you've told Josh. She's been asking around, making sure there are no holes in your story. You have to be careful. She's not going to stop." I felt my throat tighten. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about my entire life. I took a deep breath and nodded, trying to steady myself. "I know, but I can't back down now." Emma glanced at the door nervously before leaning in closer. "I don't know how much longer I can keep covering for you. If Josh finds out what's really going on, it's going to break him. You need to make a decision." I looked at her, the weight of her words settling heavily on my chest. "What decision?" Before I could answer, the door to the kitchen opened, and Josh stepped inside. He smiled at us, but I could see the unease in his eyes. "We're about to sit down for dinner," he said. "You two ready?" I nodded, plastering on a smile, though every fiber of my being screamed that something was wrong. Dinner was awkward, to say the least. Victoria had shown up late, a thin smile on her face as she sat down across from me. Her eyes flicked over to me a few times, sharp and calculating. She hadn't said a word to me, but I could feel the weight of her gaze. I tried to ignore it, to pretend everything was normal, but the tension in the room was unbearable. Throughout the meal, I felt her eyes following me, watching every move I made, every word I said. Every time I laughed or spoke to someone else, her lips would tighten into a thin line. The longer we sat there, the more I could feel the simmering anger beneath the surface. And then, just when I thought I might finally make it through the evening unscathed, Victoria spoke. "Josh?" she said, her voice sweet but laced with venom. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" Josh looked up from his plate, his brow furrowed. "What's going on, Mom?" "Privately," she insisted, her tone now colder, more demanding. "In the other room." Josh glanced at me, a brief flicker of worry crossing his face, before he stood up and followed his mother into the next room. I watched them disappear into the hallway, and the knot in my stomach tightened. Something was happening, something that would change everything. I tried to shake it off, but my mind raced with possibilities. What could she be saying to him? What was she accusing me of now? A few minutes later, Josh returned, his face unreadable. He didn't look at me as he sat down. I could feel the distance between us, a chasm opening up that I wasn't sure I could cross. "Are you okay?" I asked softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stood up and excused himself from the table, leaving me sitting there, alone. As I stared at the empty chair across from me, I realized that things were spiraling out of control faster than I could keep up with. Victoria was winning. She was chipping away at the foundation I had built piece by piece, and I was helpless to stop it. The game had changed, and I wasn't sure if I could survive it. The house felt emptier when Josh left, like it was missing a heartbeat. I sat at the table for a long moment, my fingers absently tracing the rim of my wine glass, but the taste of it had long since turned bitter. My thoughts were racing too fast to focus on anything else. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating, every sound in the house amplified in the stillness. I could hear the clinking of dishes from the kitchen, the soft hum of the fridge, the distant murmur of the conversations in the living room. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. I had to face the reality of what was happening. Victoria had gone too far this time. She'd crossed a line, and I knew it, but I couldn't let myself believe that this was just about money anymore. This was about something deeper, something personal. She saw me as a threat, an intruder into her carefully curated world of perfection. And I had stepped into that world with my plain black dress and quiet generosity, thinking I could remain in the background, unnoticed. I had been wrong. I stood up from the table, my legs shaky, my mind still spiraling. I couldn't just sit here and wait for Josh to come back with his carefully constructed facade of calm. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to let him brush this off. I didn't care what his mother said. This was our relationship, and if she was going to tear it apart, I wasn't going to let it happen without a fight. I made my way to the living room where a few family members were sitting, pretending like everything was fine. Victoria wasn't there anymore, and I took that as a sign to move quickly. I found Josh in the corner talking to one of his cousins, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. This time, there would be no avoiding it. "Josh," I said, my voice steady, though every nerve in my body was on high alert. "We need to talk." He turned to me, his expression softening for a moment. "Can't this wait?" he asked, his voice quiet, almost pleading. "No, it can't," I replied, my voice firmer now. I wasn't asking for permission. "You need to tell me what just happened in there." He didn't say anything at first. His lips pressed into a tight line, as if he were choosing his words carefully. I could see him struggling with himself, but I wasn't going to let him dance around this anymore. "Josh," I said again, this time louder, "I'm not going to let her tear us apart. If you think I'm going to sit back while she pulls these strings, you're wrong." He flinched, the tension in his shoulders palpable. "I don't think that. I don't want that," he muttered, but there was a hint of defensiveness in his voice. "Then what the hell is going on?" I asked, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "What did she say to you, Josh? What's so important that you had to leave me alone at the table like that?" His eyes darted around the room, and I could tell he was looking for an escape, but there was nowhere left to run. "Victoria's just worried, okay?" he said finally, his voice low, almost apologetic. "She's been feeling like you're changing things, like you're becoming more involved than you should be." I shook my head, the anger building in my chest. Involved in what? Helping a family member out when they're struggling? I didn't ask for recognition. I didn't ask for any of this. "I know," he said quickly, reaching out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back, not wanting his sympathy. "I know, but she's been saying that it's starting to feel like you're trying to take control, like you're trying to push her out of the picture." "Push her out of the picture?" I repeated, incredulous. "What are you talking about? I've barely even spoken to her. All I did was help. Is that really so threatening?" His silence was the only answer I needed. I could feel the weight of his indecision, the way his loyalty to his mother had overshadowed his trust in me. It hurt more than I wanted to admit, but I wasn't going to back down. "This isn't just about money, Josh," I said, my voice soft but firm. "It's about control, and it's about how she sees me. She doesn't like that I'm not just some girl from a small town. She doesn't like that I don't fit into her perfect little world, and now she's trying to tear us apart." He flinched at my words, but still, he didn't say anything. I could see him wrestling with the truth, but it wasn't enough. I needed him to make a decision, to stand by me, to put us first. "If you can't see that, Josh, then we have a bigger problem than just your mom." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. I turned away from him, the knot in my stomach tightening. I needed air. I needed to clear my head. I stepped outside, feeling the cool evening breeze wash over me as I walked to the edge of the yard. The distant sound of laughter from inside felt hollow, almost mocking. I couldn't stay here, not like this. I had tried for Josh's sake to play the part of the dutiful wife, to smile and be polite, to pretend everything was okay. But it wasn't. It hadn't been for a long time. I had known that from the moment I met Victoria. I had known she would be a problem. But I had underestimated just how far she was willing to go to maintain control. Now it was clear. She wasn't just fighting to preserve her place in the family. She was fighting for power, and if that meant destroying me, then so be it. I stood there for a long time, letting the cool night air calm the heat in my chest. But deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The night stretched on, but the tension never really left me. I stayed outside for what felt like hours, long enough for the guests to filter in and out of the house, their laughter and chatter still seeping through the walls. But my mind was elsewhere. It was on Josh, on Victoria, on everything that had come before and everything that was about to come. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for when I came back inside, but I knew it couldn't stay the way it was. The cracks in my marriage were no longer just subtle fissures. They were gaping, visible for anyone who cared to look. And the one person who should have been by my side, who should have seen this, was too blinded by his mother's manipulations to do anything about it. As I re-entered the house, I spotted Josh standing near the kitchen, his face set in a way I knew all too well. He wasn't angry, but he was distant. It was that same look he had when he didn't know how to fix things, when he was torn between his loyalty to his mother and his love for me. But there was something in his eyes now, something darker, a glimmer of realization or perhaps shame. I walked toward him, my steps purposeful. This wasn't just a conversation anymore. It was a confrontation, and it was long overdue. "Josh," I said softly, my voice unsteady but determined. "We need to talk, now." He didn't look at me immediately, his eyes focused on the floor, like he was weighing whether to face me or not. But then finally, he met my gaze. There was something different in his expression now. Not anger, but something else. Regret, realization, or maybe it was both. I wasn't sure. But I wasn't about to let him hide behind his emotions anymore. "I don't know what you want me to say, okay?" he muttered, his words tumbling out in frustration. "I'm caught in the middle here. My family, my mom, she doesn't get it. She's old-fashioned, but you're just so different. And I don't know how to make it work." His admission hit me harder than I expected. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice cold now. "You don't know how to make it work? You don't know how to be with me?" He flinched at the bite in my tone, and for a moment, I saw the hurt in his eyes. "It's not like that, I swear. It's just everything has always been a certain way with my family. I don't know how to break out of it without making things worse." "So you're telling me you're willing to let your mother tear us apart just because it's easier?" I said, the frustration seeping into my words now. "Because let me tell you, that's exactly what's happening right now. She doesn't just see me as the poor girl. She sees me as a threat to her power, and you've let her make you think that I'm the problem." "No, that's not it at all," Josh protested quickly. "I know what she's like. I know she's been hard on you. But she's my mother, and she doesn't understand why you're involved in things that should stay in the family. "I don't care what she doesn't understand," I interrupted, cutting him off. "I don't care how she feels about it. I'm not going to stand here while she undermines me at every turn. I've worked my ass off for everything I have, and I don't need her validation. I never did." Josh's face tightened. I could see his internal struggle unfolding in front of me, but there was something else there too, something I hadn't seen before. A flicker of anger, a sharp edge to his voice when he spoke again. "So what? You think she's the only one who's had to deal with this? You think I'm not stuck in the middle too? I could feel the sting of his words, but I didn't let it show. You're not stuck in the middle, Josh, I said, my voice calm but firm. You're choosing her. You're choosing to protect her, to keep everything comfortable for her, and it's destroying us. If you don't see that by now, then I don't know what to say. His jaw clenched, and I could see his hands trembling slightly, a mixture of anger and confusion swirling behind his eyes. But then he let out a long, exasperated sigh. What do you want from me? What do you expect me to do? She's my family. I've been trying to keep the peace, to keep everyone happy. I don't know how to balance all of this. The silence between us hung like a thick fog. I could feel the years of tension building up, the resentment simmering beneath the surface. This wasn't just about Victoria anymore. It wasn't just about the wedding or the guest list. It was about everything that had led to this point, the unspoken words, the compromises, the things we hadn't said to each other. I want you to choose me, Josh, I said, my voice quieter now, the fight leaving me. I want you to stand by me, to put us first, not your mother, not your family, us. For the first time that night, he looked at me like he truly understood. His gaze softened, and there was a flicker of something else there, something that looked almost like guilt. I never wanted to hurt you, he whispered, but I've been so afraid of losing her that I didn't realize I was losing you. I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling over me like a heavy blanket. I hadn't realized until this moment just how much I'd been holding in, just how much I had been sacrificing in this relationship. I had wanted him to stand by me, to choose us over the chaos that surrounded us. But I had never fully understood just how much he had been trying to hold on to everything, his family, his legacy, his mother's approval, and in the process, he had been losing himself and losing me. I don't want to lose you, Josh, I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. But I can't keep doing this, not if you're not going to fight for us. By the time the final chapter unfolds, the main character has undergone a profound transformation. Initially motivated by a thirst for vengeance, the hero has evolved into someone seeking justice, peace, and a sense of self-worth. The desire for revenge has given way to a deeper understanding of their own worth and the importance of standing up for what is right. The antagonist, who once seemed untouchable, now finds themselves at the center of their own downfall. They have lost everything: their wealth, their power, and their reputation. The once unshakable pillars of their life have crumbled, and they stand exposed, stripped of all the armor they had so carefully built around themselves. There are no longer any supporters for the antagonist. The people who once admired them have turned away, repulsed by the revelations of their wrongdoings. But standing behind the hero is a group of loyal friends, family, or allies who have believed in them all along. Their support, whether moral or strategic, has helped the protagonist secure their victory. The hero's revenge is methodical, calculated, and powerful. It isn't a petty act of destruction. It's a carefully orchestrated plan that exposes the antagonist's darkest secrets to the world. Whether through legal action, the unveiling of their sins in the public eye, or a cleverly crafted trap that ensnares them, the hero takes control of their fate. The antagonist's fatal mistake lies in their arrogance, their belief that they were untouchable, and their underestimation of the hero's resolve. Whether it was underestimating the hero's resilience, ignoring their warnings, or dismissing their potential, the antagonist paid the price for their own hubris. As the walls close in on them, they realize too late that they were outplayed, and their fall is swift and unforgiving. In the aftermath, the hero feels a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. The sweet taste of revenge lingers, but it's not as fulfilling as they thought it would be. There is no joy in seeing the antagonist suffer, only a quiet recognition that justice has been served. The hero has regained control over their life, but at what cost? The hero's life post-revenge is different, quieter, but more peaceful. They have moved on from the toxic relationships and manipulations that once consumed them. Whether they've found new love, carved out a new career, or simply relocated to a place where they can find solitude and healing, they now live on their terms. The scars from the battle may never fully fade, but the hero is stronger, wiser, and finally at peace with who they are. Others around them react to the outcome in varying ways. Some may celebrate the hero's victory, while others feel discomfort at the pain that was inflicted on the antagonist. But no one can deny the final outcome. The hero has reclaimed their life. The antagonist, now defeated and isolated, may attempt to rebuild their life, but it's too late. The damage is done. Their reputation is irreparable, and they are left to face the consequences of their own actions. The hero has walked away victorious, but the shadow of the antagonist's downfall lingers over everyone. The final line should leave a lasting impression, a mix of finality and emotional resonance. It may come as a quiet moment of realization for the hero, or as a triumphant declaration that seals the antagonist's fate. This is the culmination of everything that has led to this point. The moment the hero's journey ends and the antagonist's reign ends for good. The hero, having shed the weight of their past, may leave the antagonist with a cutting remark, a final acknowledgement that they are no longer a part of their world. Whether it's a moment of deep satisfaction or a touch of regret, the hero's final words will resonate as the ultimate punctuation mark on their story.